Minister, like other deputies, I want to congratulate you, but I'm sure you'll be the first to say to congratulate those in the school community who allowed and facilitated the return to school. It has made a huge difference in many families' lives. But unfortunately, there have been many people who have not been able to return to the school, and they include those in the very high risk, both teachers and families. And I wonder, Minister, if you would consider an online platform that would pair those two groups of people to allow both of them to return to the thing that they love, to the school community.
My department has published guidance, as you are aware, to support schools in making adapted education provision for pupils who cannot return to school because they are medically certified as being at very high risk due to COVID-19. It is important that pupils in these circumstances maintain a meaningful connection with their class and school to successfully continue their learning from home. Schools do have discretion to manage and redistribute their teaching support resources in order to best meet the learning needs of these pupils. Supports may include a teacher who is also certified as very high risk to COVID-19, who cannot themselves attend school and may be in a position to provide remote teaching to a very high risk student. The Health Protection Surveillance Centre and the HSE has also published guidance in relation to the return to school for at-risk groups. It outlines that children with immediate family members, including parents in both the very high risk and high risk categories, can safely return to school, and it is important for the child's overall well-being that they would actually choose to do so. This is consistent with public health advice internationally in relation to at-risk family members. The priority is that the household continues to follow all current advice on how to minimise the risk of coronavirus through regular hand washing, cough etiquette and social distancing. I'm also reassured by the public health evidence to date that since schools have reopened, it supports the national and international position that schools are low-risk environments for COVID-19 and are not key drivers of transmission in the community. It is also important to acknowledge the enormous work that schools have undertaken to ensure that schools are safe places for their pupils. And the Department has provided a suite of guidance to support schools in this work, following engagement and consultation with all of the education partners in the development of this guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy McAuliffe.
Thank you, Minister. I welcome the fact that for those very high-risk teachers and those very high-risk students, the possibility of online remote learning pairing is an option. But I'm speaking, Minister, about those people with a rare disease, and I've had the pleasure of working with many of them. Rare diseases are often very misunderstood. There isn't often a huge degree of knowledge within general practice, and often the patient themselves become the expert in that disease relating to other international bodies. And I would say to the Department, while I understand in the broad scheme, returning to school is the best possible option, we have to understand that in circumstances where we're all juggling risk, for all of us, in every part of our day, we make risk calculations. And I think we have to trust parents of people with a rare disease, where there is a rare disease member in their family, that returning to school isn't safe. We have to trust those families to make that decision. And I would urge the Department to be flexible on this point. It is not about opening the floodgates. It is about trying to trust those families.
Thank you, Deputy. Just to reiterate very clearly from the outset, both the international and the national evidence to date is very clear that schools by their nature are safe environments. And there's also an absolute recognition that the resources and the measures that need to be put in place as part of the roadmap for the safe reopening of our schools have been put in place, and a huge debt of gratitude, I absolutely acknowledge, is owed to the school communities who are ensuring that those measures are being implemented. But indeed, all of the expert advice that's available to us at the minute is again reiterating time and again that schools are safe environments. And I want to acknowledge the role that's played by everybody to ensure that that's the reality. Equally so, I suppose, to acknowledge that even as late as last week, the evidence would show that the rate, that students, before they return to schools and once schools have opened in this last month, there has been no material difference in terms of COVID-19. And again, to reiterate that the Health Protection Surveillance Centre and the HSE has published guidance and very specific guidance in relation to the return to school for risk groups. And it outlines that children with immediate family members, including parents in both the high-risk and very high-risk categories, students or children who have parents in this category or family members in this category, can safely return to school. And indeed, they make the point that it's important for the child's overall well-being that they would do so.
And I do take on board the point you're making, the very genuine way in which you're approaching this. But I do want to raise the case of a specific person, Jan Rinn, who was sadly diagnosed with CLL in 2011. She has been cocooning since February. 2 of her older children have moved out of the home and are living with another family member. And the 2 younger children, they have, as a family, have made a decision not to let them return to school. And the reason they're doing that is because internationally CLL patient organisations record that 90% of CLL patients who contract COVID-19 are hospitalised, and unfortunately 37% of patients with CLL who contact COVID-19 pass away. That's a calculation that family has to make. We're all making those calculations, and I'd ask the Department to do everything they can with this case and with others to consider it.
Thank you, Deputy. Again, just to acknowledge that there are very individual circumstances, and I'm not aware of the individual circumstances of the case that you referenced there. And I do appreciate that there, is anxiety and anxiousness around the whole COVID-19 situation. However, again, I must reiterate that everything that we are doing in our schools is underpinned by the best public health advice available to us. And again, I must reiterate that the Health Protection Surveillance Centre and the HSC has published guidelines in relation to the return to school and the safe return to school, particularly indeed of children who may well have family members who are designated to be at risk or very high risk. And it is their recommendation that in the interest, that schools are safe places, and that in the interest of the health and well-being and the advancement, the socialisation and the academic development and all the other aspects of a child's well-being, that it is in their best interest that they would return to school and be catered for within the school environment. Thank you, Deputy.
Minister,